Hi, I'm Patricia. And 2 weeks ago, at my parents' anniversary gala, my sister stood across a ballroom, looked me dead in the eye, and called me fat. Not by accident, not in private, but loud enough for the string quartet to flinch. She smiled while doing it. The room laughed, and I swallowed it, like I always had. But what no one knew was that the ballroom, the flowers, the very stage she stood on, I paid for all of it. So, when they handed her the mic and the world clapped for her speech, I took mine back. Want to know what happened when I told the truth in front of everyone, and she couldn't interrupt me this time? I should have known something was off the moment I opened that envelope. It wasn't the cream-colored cardstock or the ornate gold lettering that caught me. It was the line printed under attendee name, +1 to Malis Ford. That was it. No Patricia Langley, no youngest daughter, no real acknowledgement that I was anything more than an afterthought. I sat with the envelope in my lap, staring at it like it might rearrange itself if I waited long enough. Milese had mentioned the anniversary gala a few weeks prior. "You should come," she'd said over the phone. "You know how Mom gets about appearances." But she never said I was invited under her name. A +1? For my own parents' 75th anniversary? Still, I knew if I didn't show up, the gossip would hit me harder than the invite ever did. "Patricia always distances herself," they'd say. "She never cared much for family." But I did. I cared enough to come back. I told myself this trip wasn't about being seen, it was about being present, for them. For Mom and Dad. Charleston hadn't changed much in the 5 years I'd been gone. Spanish moss still draped the oaks like a southern ghost story. The roads wound tight between antebellum homes, and the humidity clung to your neck like an unspoken grudge. I drove in with the windows up and the AC on high, trying not to overthink every street I turned onto. But it was hard to ignore the feeling creeping in with every passing mile. The further I got into the city, the more I felt like I was shrinking. I passed the old park where Callista and I used to play. She'd take the swings, I'd take the monkey bars. Even then, she liked the spotlight. I just wanted the quiet. It had been years since I'd thought of that place, and even longer since it had felt like it belonged to me too. The hotel stood downtown, stately as ever. Marble steps, grand archways, a doorman in a tux, and a smile too stiff to be real. Inside, the ballroom glowed under chandeliers that probably cost more than my car. Tables were already filling. Laughter echoed in high ceilings. Champagne glasses clinked like tiny reminders of who's who. No one greeted me. No one said, "We've been waiting for you." The front staff barely made eye contact as I approached the check-in table. I cleared my throat. "Patricia Langley." The young woman flipped through her clipboard, then paused. "I don't see you listed under that name." She glanced at her colleague, then back at me. "Are you perhaps a guest of Ms. Malis Ford?" I didn't flinch. "Yes, that's me." A name tag was handed over, blank space where my title should have been. No daughter, no family, just the word guest in bold black print. I pinned it to my dress like a label I hadn't chosen. Callista spotted me from across the room. Her eyes widened theatrically as she made her way over, arms outstretched, like we hadn't been estranged by years of silence. "Oh my God, you made it!" she sang out, loud enough to gather attention. "I was just telling everyone how great it'd be if you actually showed." That word, "actually," landed like a slap with a smile. It was her specialty. Polite jabs wrapped in gold foil. People nearby nodded, amused, perhaps entertained. One woman sipped her wine and gave me a look I'd seen before, the kind that scans, judges, and stores away for later. "You look so comfortable," Callista added, eyeing my green linen dress with a tilt of her head. "Very you." I tightened my jaw, careful not to let the fire rise past my throat. I didn't come here to bite back, not yet. Let her keep her games. Let her think I was still playing by her rules. I offered a smile, small, unshaken, and moved to find my seat. I scanned the central table, the one set aside for immediate family. Name cards glinted under the light. Callista Langley, Isolde Langley, Charles Langley, even Malis had a place. But mine wasn't there. I circled the table again, slower this time. No Patricia, no placeholder, not even a fold of paper left blank. Somewhere behind me, a waiter asked if I needed help. No, I replied, though it felt more like a question than an answer. I stepped back, watching my sister sip from her glass as if nothing had happened, her smile fixed in place like a weapon disguised as warmth. In Charleston, they don't exile you with noise. They do it with silence and a smile. If clothes could speak, mine were whispering I didn't belong here. The green linen dress I had chosen, handmade, no label, worn because it breathed easy in spring air, looked out of place against the polished bodies wrapped in satin and sequins. It wasn't just the fabric. It was the unspoken rule. When you step into a ballroom like this, you don't come to be yourself. You come to be who they expect you to be. I made my way past the bar and out onto the garden terrace, where string lights blinked softly in the twilight. A trio of violins played something classical and forgettable. People stood in curated clusters, glasses in hand, posture precise. I could feel their glances as I passed. Not malicious, just cataloging, like I was a smudge on an otherwise flawless frame. I leaned against the railing, taking a slow breath. I wore comfort, I thought. They wore status. Milas appeared beside me, her presence familiar and always a little awkward. She nudged my elbow gently. You okay? I smiled, but not too wide. Yeah, just taking it all in. She gave me a look that said she knew better, then turned toward the crowd. You look good, though. Real. Thanks, I said, even though it didn't land. Compliments here were often just well-dressed lies. A voice called out from inside. Group photo for the family! People shuffled toward the main hallway, where a backdrop with our family name in gold stood ready. Callista took center stage, naturally. She directed the photographer, like she was shooting for a magazine. Mom and Dad were flanked by Callista's children, Isolde smiling, as if nothing in the world had ever gone sideways. No one called my name. It was a cousin, Emily, I think, who finally turned and said, Patricia, you coming? But by then, the shutter had clicked, the pose held, and the moment immortalized without me. It's fine, I said, waving off the awkwardness. I'm probably not on their social media list anyway. Back at the table, dinner had started. I picked at a salad while conversations unfolded around me like I wasn't there. People shared updates on mortgages, private school waiting lists, holiday plans to Napa. Someone asked if I was still doing that nonprofit thing in the city. I said yes. They nodded like I'd mentioned a hobby, not a career. Callista stood with a glass in hand. It was her turn to speak. To my wonderful parents, she began, her voice clear and smooth, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. We all took different paths. Some of us chose family, others chose projects. Laughter scattered politely around the room. She went on to brag about Lucian's acceptance into Columbia, about her ex-husband who continued to support the kids so gracefully, about how grateful she was for community and tradition. None of those words included me. I looked down at my wine, still untouched, still red. Then came the backhanded introductions. You're the sister from New York, right? A man at the table asked me. The one who left? I gave him the kind of smile I reserve for customer service calls. Something like that. But in my head, I finished the sentence. I didn't leave. I was let go. I didn't bring a speech. I didn't stand to toast. Years ago, I'd been told not to speak at a similar event because my tone was a little too direct, that my honesty made people uncomfortable. This time, I brought silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because showing up was my speech. Sometimes presence is protest. Toward the end of the meal, as guests began moving to dessert tables and forming new circles, Lucian drifted over. He was taller now, his hair messier than the last time I saw him. A little less polished than Callista preferred. He stopped a few feet from me, shifting on his heels. Dia, Miss Patricia, I turned to him, trying to read his expression. You look really, real. I blinked. Real? He nodded quickly. Yeah, like, everyone else is so. He glanced toward the crowd. Shiny! You're not trying so hard. It's cool. I didn't expect it. Not from him. Not here. And for a moment, I forgot how much I had been erased, because someone still saw me. Depends, I told her, holding her gaze without blinking. Which part was real? Callista didn't flinch. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but had all the smugness of one. You know how these things go. People say things. It's all just family fun. Family fun. That was what she called it. Mockery with hors d'oeuvres. I stepped past her without replying, making my way back into the ballroom as the clinking of forks against dessert plates signaled the next phase of the evening. A string quartet resumed playing something delicate and forgettable in the corner. My seat was still untouched. So was my wine. I sat down, my back straight, hands folded neatly in my lap, and waited. I could feel eyes flick toward me, some curious, some confused. Maybe a few realized by now that I wasn't just an extra in the background of their curated celebration. Then the microphone squealed slightly, catching everyone's attention. The host tapped it twice before announcing, "Now a few words from Callista Langley, eldest daughter of the Langley family." I took a slow sip, bracing. She walked up to the podium with the grace of someone who knew exactly how to command a room and how to use a microphone like a scalpel. Her voice was syrupy and clear. "We've all taken different journeys," she began, eyes sweeping across the room. "Some of us have chosen to build families, others have followed their passions." That pause, that glance in my direction, that perfectly timed chuckle after. She kept going, touching on Lucian's achievements, how proud she was to have raised a future Ivy Leaguer. She thanked her ex-husband for continuing to co-parent with grace. She spoke of tradition, of carrying forward her parents' legacy, but she never once said my name. As the applause echoed, I reached for my napkin to steady my hands. Not from nerves, just fury, tightly leashed. Someone leaned toward me from 2 seats away, a woman I vaguely remembered from a past fundraiser. "It's amazing," she whispered. "What you did for Callista when her husband lost his job. That kind of quiet strength, that's what holds families together." I turned my head slowly. "Sorry?" She smiled, a little unsure now. "You paid their mortgage, didn't you? For almost a year?" I blinked. "Did she tell you that?" Her face froze. "Oh, I thought she didn't mention it?" "No," I said, softly but clearly. "She didn't." The truth hit me harder than her speech had. Not just that she took the help, but that she took credit for surviving without ever mentioning who kept the lights on. I stood, needing air. As I walked out onto the stone terrace again, I passed 2 hotel staff near the side doors. They didn't notice me at first. "She's not wearing her usual," one said. "That's gotta be borrowed." "Last minute," the other added. "They said it wasn't even tailored." They weren't talking about me. I turned my head slightly and caught the direction of their glance, toward Callista, laughing by the dessert table in a dress that had looked like designer couture under ballroom lighting, but now, under the garden strings, showed its seams. Even her show had cracks. It didn't make me feel better. Not exactly. But it settled something. A new kind of clarity. I wasn't invisible. I was edited out. I pulled my phone from my clutch and texted Milas. "Don't leave yet. I may need a ride, or a witness." A moment later, I turned to head back inside. Callista was waiting for me just beyond the door, standing with one foot angled toward the crowd, the other toward me. Like she couldn't decide if she wanted to keep performing or confront me. She tilted her head, eyes too sweet to be real. "Still enjoying the show?" I didn't blink. "Depends," I said. "Which part was real?" She didn't answer my question. Of course not. She just smiled and turned back toward the crowd, like I'd asked her what time it was. The music had softened again, and the MC's voice rang out, crisp and cheerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served!" I lingered for a second, giving her space to disappear into her admirers. I wasn't going to follow her trail of perfume and compliments. Not anymore. As guests began filing toward their seats, I stepped aside, watching the wave of motion settle into neatly arranged tables. Names were printed on small cards, folded like tents, each one delicately placed, a sign of who mattered and how much. I hovered nearby, waiting to hear my name called. A pause. A glance. Some indication that there was a place set for me. But it never came. A server, barely older than Lucian, approached hesitantly. "Ms. Langley?" I looked at him, jaw clenched. "You're actually at table 16, he said, eyes flicking down to his list. "Right over there, near the hallway." I followed the direction he pointed, walking past clusters of relatives and friends, laughing at inside jokes I was never part of. Table 16 sat near the service entrance, partly obscured by a large floral arrangement. There were 2 elderly cousins already seated, a woman I didn't recognize, and 3 empty chairs. I wasn't just seated away. I was placed out of frame. The food began arriving, salads first, then a chilled soup in delicate glass bowls. I reached for my water, my fingers brushing condensation, when I heard her voice again. "Careful with the desserts." Callista. I turned to find her right beside me, smiling as she pretended to fix the cuff on her dress. "Some of us can't bounce back like we used to." The words sliced through the air like a knife dipped in sugar. It wasn't loud, but it was just loud enough. 2 guests looked over. One of them laughed, then looked down as if they hadn't meant to. I locked eyes with her, held them. "You're right," I said evenly. "Some of us don't pretend anymore." Her smile faltered, just slightly, but she recovered fast. Too fast. She breezed away before I could add more. A woman across from me, someone who'd sat next to my mother earlier, leaned in. "Callista always worries about you," she said softly. "She just wants you healthy." I forced a breath through my nose. Not a laugh, not a sigh. Just release. "She doesn't want me healthy," I said, keeping my voice low. "She wants me small, easier to ignore." I stood then, gently pushing back my chair and stepping out into the hallway, where the air was cooler and no one was looking. I leaned against the wall, the curve of plaster cool against my back, and reached into my clutch for my phone. The folder labeled "Just in Case" was still there. Tapped open, it revealed a collection of documents. Property records, trust fund revisions, signed contracts, all with my name. All quietly forgotten, like I had been. I stared at them for a while, then closed the screen. Lucian's voice carried faintly from the doorway. "I don't get why Mom treats her that way," he was saying. "Trish is cooler than all of them." I turned my head just enough to see his profile lit by the warm glow of a wall sconce. He wasn't talking to me, but it didn't matter. For the first time all night, I didn't feel like I was surviving the evening. I felt like I was reclaiming it. I stepped back into the ballroom, not slowly, not with hesitation. I walked like someone who had nothing to prove, but everything to remind them of. The lights inside had dimmed slightly as I stepped back into the hallway. Conversations buzzed in corners. Laughter trickled like wine. But the pulse of the room had shifted. Something quieter now, more aware. Like the party had sensed a shift in current, but hadn't figured out where the storm was coming from. I wasn't looking for attention, but I didn't duck from it either. Near the exit to the catering corridor, a staff member approached. Clipboard in hand, brow furrowed like he was solving a math problem on paper. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, tapping a sheet. "Are you the event lead? The rental contract lists your name." I blinked. For a second, I thought he had the wrong person. Then I remembered. "Yes," I said calmly. "I am." He smiled, visibly relieved. "Great. Just needed a quick signature to confirm the last invoice for lighting adjustments and the floral extension you approved this morning." He held out a pen. I took it. There it was, printed clearly across the top of the form. Patricia Langley, primary sponsor. Langley Grant Trust. No Callista. No co-chair. No shared credits. Just my name. I handed the form back, offered a simple nod, and walked toward the main ballroom, past clusters of servers in black ties and white gloves. One of them paused mid-step and murmured, "Evening, Ms. Langley." That was new. Inside, the atmosphere hadn't changed on the surface, but the undercurrent was different. I could feel it in the way people glanced and then looked again, half curious, half questioning, like they suddenly realized I wasn't just an estranged sister who'd shown up in a handmade dress. I didn't stop to explain. I didn't need to. By the far wall, Malis caught my eye. She stepped into my path, her face more alert now. "You okay?" she asked. "You look different." I let out a quiet laugh. "I'm remembering who I am." She grinned. "That's dangerous, you know, especially in this room." I leaned closer. "Good." We both smiled, real ones this time. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Callista moving toward us. Her posture was perfect, her lipstick untouched. She wore the same practiced expression that had carried her through magazine covers and charity galas, but something behind her eyes shifted when she saw the exchange between me and Malis. She reached us with her usual grace, voice like syrup warmed just right. "You're glowing tonight," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Someone have a little crush?" I stared at her. "No," I said, tone even. "Just good lighting and financial leverage." Her smile tightened. That mask never cracked easily, but it thinned when pressed. I didn't wait for a comeback. I turned and walked across the ballroom, letting her watch me this time. As I passed the central photo booth, I slowed. There was a large poster mounted beside it. "Thank you to our sponsors." Gold letters, floral trim, and beneath it, a list of names. Callista Langley PR. The foundation. A couple of business partners I recognized from old family events, but no mention of the Langley Grant Trust. No mention of me. It was bold, or maybe it was desperate. I stood there for a long moment, letting the insult settle the way salt settles on a fresh wound. Not deep, but stinging. Then I pulled out my phone. If they won't say it, I will. I didn't press send, yet. Instead, I lowered my phone and slid it into my clutch, letting the decision sit on my tongue a moment longer. Not because I was second-guessing, but because I wanted to savor it. There's a particular silence that settles in your bones when you realize you don't need anyone's permission to tell the truth. Before I could move, Malis appeared at my side. She didn't say anything at first. She just handed me her phone. "You might want to see this." I glanced at the screen. A TikTok video was paused at the 10-second mark. I tapped play. There it was. Clear audio, shaky video. Callista's voice drifting through laughter like a dagger. "Careful with the desserts. Some of us can't bounce back like we used to." A quick pan to faces stiffening. A tight laugh. My own profile, turning slightly, holding steady. The caption read, "Wait, did she just say that to her sister?" View count, 28.7K. And Ryzen. I exhaled, but not from surprise. From confirmation. "She did," I murmured. Malis nodded. "It's spreading. People are sharing it like wildfire." A few tables away, I saw a group of younger guests looking at their phones, then back at me. Whispers. Shifted glances. Something was unraveling. A server stopped near our table, hesitant. "Ms. Langley?" His voice dropped lower. "We've had 3 walkouts. Guests said they saw the video and didn't want to be associated." I nodded once. "That's not my fire," I said quietly. "I didn't light it. But I won't put it out either." He blinked, then backed away without another word. I stood and walked toward the back lounge area, smaller, dimmer, and more private. The noise of the ballroom dulled behind heavy curtains. A man I recognized from the hotel's AV team hovered by the door, pretending to scroll through his phone. As I passed, he glanced up and whispered, There's something you should have. Off the record. He handed me a small flash drive, already loaded. Security footage from the last gala. I wasn't sure if it meant anything, but now, I think it does. I thanked him. My hands didn't shake. I didn't ask questions. I just walked to the nearest table, pulled out my laptop, and opened the folder labeled Just in Case. One video showed Callista accidentally smudging the ink on my speech cards at a donor brunch 2 years ago. Another, her slipping behind the podium to check the mic moments before my mic went dead mid-sentence. And here, I thought I was clumsy. I took my time. I combined the documents I'd compiled earlier, the trust fund signatures, the event sponsor forms, the digital receipts, with the video from TikTok and the flash drive clips. Labeled the folder, zipped it, and drafted an email. Subject: For the record, not revenge. Recipients: a quiet list. Board members: 2 sponsors. 1 journalist I trusted. I hit send. Then I returned to the cocktail bar, left my phone unlocked, screen tilted up. The video played silently in a loop. If they wanted to talk, they would. If they wanted to ask, they'd find their answers. Callista walked by 10 minutes later. She didn't see me at first. She saw herself, on the screen. Froze mid-step. Her face didn't crack. It collapsed, slow and sharp. She turned to me, voice low and tight. "What did you do?" I picked up my glass, took a sip, and looked her square in the eye. "I stopped erasing myself," I said. "That's all." She didn't say another word. Just turned and disappeared into the crowd like she always did, when she didn't have control of the narrative. The lounge grew quiet again as the video kept looping on the screen. I didn't stop it. I didn't need to. One of the sponsors approached a few minutes later, gesturing toward the gallery outside the ballroom. "They've put up a donor display in the corridor. You should come see it." I followed him out past the bar, into the long marble-floored hallway where small framed photos lined the walls. A headline in ornate gold font read, "Impact in Action, Celebrating Those Who Give Back." The 4th photo in the line made me stop cold. It was me, 5 years younger, in jeans and a damp hoodie, handing out boxed meals at a shelter downtown. Tired, no makeup, hair pulled back. The photo was candid. Someone had taken it without me noticing. I remembered that night clearly. It was one of the hardest months of my life. I'd just sold my apartment to keep a nonprofit program running. I was volunteering because I couldn't afford to sit still. Below the photo was a glossy plaque, Callista Langley Foundation, Ground Impact Work. That photo was taken without my consent. A friend of Callista's, a woman from her donor circle, stepped beside me. "It was such a great campaign year," she said. "That image was everywhere. Callista said you were fine with it." I turned to her slowly. "I wasn't asked." She blinked, uncertain. "Oh, I just assumed." "You assumed right. I was broke. I wasn't doing it for anyone's press release. That moment was survival, not branding." Her face reddened slightly, and she backed away without another word. Behind me, a familiar voice piped up. "Wait." Lucien. I turned as he stepped forward, wide-eyed and caught between childhood loyalty and truth. "Mom didn't tell them it was you? You're the one who pulled me out of the street that day." Several people nearby went still. His voice hadn't been loud, but it didn't need to be. "She didn't," I replied, without looking away from him. "But you just did." He bit his lip, unsure what to say next. I didn't need him to say anything. The room was already shifting. "She never mentioned Patricia helped?" someone whispered. "That's the same photo she used in the awards press," said another. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I watched it all unfold like a slow domino fall, truth knocking down carefully arranged illusions. I had no intention of stopping it. Suddenly, Callista's heels clicked across the marble. She stormed into the gallery, her voice sharper than I'd heard it all night. "You think this is some kind of payback?" she hissed, her eyes gleaming like glass on the edge of shatter. I tilted my head. "No," I said. "It's revelation. Different thing." You want to destroy me? I almost laughed. I don't have to, I replied. You're doing fine on your own. She looked like she wanted to slap me, or hug me, maybe both. But instead, she turned, arms folded tightly, and stood in place like a statue, unwilling to face the cracks forming in her base. Milas joined me at the edge of the corridor. She didn't ask for details. She never did. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, "You ready?" I glanced at my phone. A notification blinked across the screen. Interview scheduled. Patricia Langley, legacy donor. Press tent, 9:45 p.m. I turned to Malis, let a small smile stretch across my face. Let's make sure they spell my name right this time. The interview was scheduled for 9:45, but by 9:40, I was already walking toward the ballroom stage. I hadn't planned it this way. I hadn't rehearsed a speech. But there was a pressure in the air, thick, expectant, and I felt it pressing between my shoulder blades like a steady hand guiding me forward. If they wanted a show, I decided they'd get one. But this time, I'd write the script. The MC had just begun his closing remarks when I stepped into the wings. His voice echoed smoothly through the microphone, thanking donors, partners, and the committee. He read from the updated list, finally updated. And lastly, he said, pausing just enough for the audience to still, a very special thank you to Patricia Langley and the Langley Grant Trust, without whom this evening wouldn't be possible. There it was. Gasps, a few muffled reactions. I saw heads swivel. I felt the shift without looking. Isolde, seated near the center, blinked once and looked down. Callista! Callista didn't move at all. Her smile stayed, but it was frozen. Waxed in place like something meant for display, not function. I didn't wait for a cue. I walked up the side stairs, took the mic from the MC gently. He looked at me, surprised, but he stepped back. Thank you, I began. My voice didn't shake. Tonight isn't about being seen. It's about finally refusing to disappear. The room went still. I scanned the crowd, slowly, not searching for anyone in particular, but making sure they all saw me. I've been quiet for years. Some people assumed it was humility. Others mistook it for weakness. But silence, I said, isn't peace. It's exile. A few people shifted in their seats. I kept going. And exile ends tonight. Somewhere near the second row, Callista moved. She stood, her mouth open, just barely. I didn't stop. For too long, I let people speak over me, around me, for me. I let others wear my effort like a costume while I stood in the shadows, uninvited. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was told not to ruin the moment. Someone in the back coughed, a single awkward noise in a sea of quiet. I turned slightly toward Callista. You've had the microphone long enough, I said, not cruelly, but clearly. Tonight, I take it back. She sat down. I let the pause settle. Then I finished. I didn't come back to take revenge. I came back to take my name. A beat. And tonight, that name no longer fits under your shadow. I stepped away from the mic. No dramatic bow, no performative smile, just silence, the thick, weighted kind that follows truth. I walked down the center aisle. I didn't look behind me. Until I heard it. One clap. Lucienne. Then another. And then more, scattered, unsure, but genuine. Not for a performance, not for a polished lie, but for something honest, even if uncomfortable. Callista didn't clap. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed forward, locked on nothing. And me? I walked out, not triumphant, but grounded. As I moved through the split room, past rows of familiar and unfamiliar faces, I felt no need for applause. Because when the truth finally stands up, it doesn't need applause. It needs room. The heavy ballroom doors clicked shut behind me, sealing the applause and tension in one echoing thud. The hallway beyond felt cooler, wide, still, and lined with silence too thick to ignore. I kept walking, each step echoing against polished floors that had seen too many versions of me over the years. Daughter, disappointment, and now, something else entirely. The silence after truth is louder than any applause, and far more revealing. People turned their heads as I passed, no longer out of politeness or curiosity, but something weightier. Respect, maybe, or realization. Even the staff seemed different now. A woman by the coat room nodded slowly as I passed, her eyes soft but intentional. No words, no smile, just acknowledgement. No one touched me, no one dared. Because once you stand in truth, you're radioactive, beautifully untouchable. Outside, the air had cooled further, the valet circle buzzing softly with idling engines and casual conversation. Milas appeared by my side again, seemingly out of nowhere, her usual calm woven with something close to awe. "You good?" she asked, her tone gentle but steady. I didn't answer right away. One of Callista's longtime donors, a man who used to pretend not to know my name, approached with a glass of bourbon in one hand. "You changed the room tonight," he said, "and trust me, the trust could use women like you." I shook his hand, keeping my voice even. "I'm not looking for validation, just alignment." He smiled, more genuine than I expected. "You got it." Just then, the glass doors behind us opened, and Callista stepped out. Her stride had slowed, her expression carefully rehearsed, but the cracks were showing. Her supervisor followed close behind with two other members of her firm, faces tight, clipped words exchanged under breath. He turned to me. "We had no idea," he said. "You deserved credit." Then he looked at Callista. "Let's schedule a conversation. First thing Monday." Her shoulders dropped just enough to be noticeable. Not defeated, but dented. I turned away, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Let her learn what I had to carry for years. There is no armor against exposure. Near the valet stand, she fumbled with her clutch and checked her reflection in a side mirror. Her necklace caught the light, only it didn't glint like it had earlier. One of the stones was missing. A valet whispered to another, "Looks cheap, like costume jewelry." I heard it, didn't flinch. Instead, I handed my valet ticket to the young man in a red jacket. He took it with a quiet nod. Malus joined me near the car. Neither of us spoke until the headlights pulled around. "I didn't need them to clap," I said. "I needed them to see." "They saw," she replied, "and they'll never unsee it." My car pulled up, engine humming low. I opened the door and slid in. As the door closed and I settled back, my phone lit up with a new message. From Mom, "We need to talk. Come by tomorrow." I didn't type a response. I didn't even open the thread. I just looked ahead, through the windshield, at the dark road stretching out from the Circle Drive. Because when you stop chasing validation, you start leading the narrative. Morning came with that sticky Charleston heat that clung to everything. Your clothes, your breath, your thoughts. I'd barely slept. My phone, face down on the bedside table, still hadn't been touched since the message from Mom. But the day didn't wait, and neither did the brunch that followed the chaos of the night before. By 10 a.m., the garden behind the family estate was buzzing with well-heeled guests, balancing tiny quiches and fruit skewers on paper-thin china. White tablecloths fluttered in the breeze, and servers in khaki vests refilled champagne glasses like nothing explosive had unfolded 12 hours earlier. I didn't wear green this time. A navy shift dress, flat sandals, hair pulled back, clean, simple, honest. Lucienne caught my eye across the lawn, then ducked behind the AV table. A minute later, the large screen flickered on. I'd forgotten there was a tribute slideshow planned. Honestly, I'd expected them to cancel it after everything, but apparently the schedule must go on, even if the story had changed. The screen lit up with soft instrumental music, a reel of family photos rolling by. My parents' wedding, baby pictures of Callista and me, a few awkward Thanksgiving shots. Then Lucian's voice filled the space. My mom told me I should keep this short, but I just want to thank someone who doesn't get thanked enough. I froze mid-bite. My Aunt Patricia, he said, clear as day. She believed in me when I was failing school. When everyone else thought I was just lazy or distracted, she listened. A ripple passed through the guests. I wouldn't be at Columbia without her. There was no applause, just a soft exhale that rolled through the crowd like someone had opened a window. I didn't look at Callista. I didn't need to. People shifted in their seats. Some leaned in to whisper. Others simply turned their heads toward me. Milas, seated beside me, reached under the table and gave my hand the lightest squeeze. A few minutes later, the buffet line began forming, and I slipped toward the hedges, away from the chatter. I needed air. Something real. That's when I heard a voice I hadn't expected. Patricia. I turned. It was her ex-husband, Jeff. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. He rubbed the back of his neck. I never said it properly. I didn't speak. Let him say whatever he'd been holding. Thank you for covering the rent when I lost my job, for helping with Lucian. She never told anyone it was you. I nodded once. That was enough. He lingered like he wanted to say more. Then he gave a slight, grateful nod and walked away. When I returned to the table, the shift was clear. People no longer avoided my eyes. Some offered smiles. Others stopped pretending they didn't know what had happened. Callista stood near the rose archway, alone. Her phone in hand, screen glowing. She scrolled, locked it, unlocked it again. Her jaw set, lips pursed. Her silence, for once, had no control. It wasn't strategic. It was exposure, and she didn't know how to sit inside it. After dessert, I excused myself and walked the garden path that curved behind the estate. The same one I used to take as a teenager when the house felt too loud. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't need to. I didn't need to win, I whispered to myself. I just needed the lies to lose. I reached the front gate, ready to leave unnoticed, when a woman in a crisp blazer approached. Ms. Langley? I turned. She smiled, held out a card. We're from the Women's Foundation of South Carolina. We'd like you to speak at our fall gala. Women like you, they don't just recover, they redefine the room. I didn't speak, just smiled. The gates opened. The gates closed behind me with a slow, deliberate thud, like a punctuation mark on a sentence I didn't realize I'd been writing for years. I held the card from the foundation between 2 fingers, letting it sway with the breeze as I walked to my car. I didn't drive home. Not right away. I went to the house I hadn't stepped into in nearly 4 years. My mother's. By the time I pulled up to the wraparound porch, the sun had dipped low enough to stretch the shadows across the lawn. Everything looked the same. The planters on the steps, the chipped paint on the banister that Callista always said we'd fix and never did. Same wind chimes by the kitchen window, still too loud, still clanging like an argument that didn't know when to stop. I parked and took a breath before walking up. No bags, no flowers, just me. The door was unlocked, always was. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and the old rose soap my mother still insisted on keeping by every sink. The family pictures still lined the hallway. Callista in her homecoming dress, me in a choir robe I never wanted to wear, our parents smiling too wide to be believable. The hallway didn't feel haunted, just tired. She was in the back garden, as if she knew I'd show. I didn't say anything at first, neither did she. We sat across from each other, a small table between us. The kind of table that once held iced tea and bridge cards, but now only carried silence. She poured tea anyway. The ritual was older than either of our resentments. Last night, she said finally, her voice more gravel than air. You surprised me? I nodded. I surprised myself. She looked down into her cup. I let her speak for this family too long. I should have said something years ago. You didn't, I said, not cruelly, just fact. I silenced you because it was easier than defending you, and I told myself you didn't mind. I minded. She didn't apologize, not directly, but her voice cracked a little. You were always more than how she made you feel. I see that now. It took everything in me not to scoff, but I didn't. You weren't supposed to protect me from her, I said. You were supposed to see me through her. She nodded slowly. I see you now. A breeze moved through the trees, shaking the leaves just enough to make them sound like a slow wave coming ashore. We didn't speak for a while. Some wounds don't close. They just stop bleeding. I stood, brushing non-existent crumbs from my lap. I'm not angry anymore, I said, but I'm not staying for dinner. She didn't try to stop me, just watched me gather nothing but my own composure. I was halfway down the brick path when her voice came, soft but sharp enough to find me. You were always the strong one, she called. I just didn't want it to be true. I stopped, just for a second, then kept walking. Because healing doesn't always mean returning, it can also mean continuing. 2 weeks later, I stood backstage in a historic theater in downtown Charleston. Brick walls, velvet curtains, and the faint scent of old wood and new beginnings. This wasn't a family event. No one in the audience knew my sister's voice or my mother's silences. They only knew the version of me listed on the program, Patricia Langley, keynote speaker. I didn't return to be loved again. I came back to remember that I already was, just not by them. The crowd was mostly women, professionals, organizers, students, leaders in tailored jackets and natural curls. I scanned the room through the slit in the curtain. They weren't here for gossip or spectacle. They were here because they believed in reinvention. A volunteer straightened my microphone as a board member stepped forward to introduce me. Please welcome tonight's keynote, Patricia Langley, Executive Director, Silent Benefactor, and a woman who chose integrity over image. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was warm, present, real. I walked onto the stage with calm steps and steady breath. No heels, no jewelry screaming for attention. Just me. And for once, that was enough. I used to think silence kept me safe, I began. I was wrong. Silence just keeps your name off the list. A few people nodded. Others leaned in. I kept my eyes moving, row to row, finding connection without needing control. I let people write my story for a long time. Some chapters were flattering, others weren't, but none of them were mine. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. What I learned, I said, is that not every battle has to end in fire. Sometimes standing in your truth long enough burns everything that doesn't belong. After the final applause, I stepped off stage lighter. Not empty, just clearer. A staffer approached with a small envelope. This came in weeks ago, she said, from your father. He left it with the foundation and asked us to give it to you when you were ready. My breath caught, not in grief, but surprise. Inside was a letter, his handwriting, slanted, neat. To the daughter who hid her light so others could shine. Your time is now. That was all. I folded the letter once, placed it in my bag. Didn't cry. Outside, the night was still humid. Charleston never fully letting go of summer. As I reached the front steps, reporters stood near the curb. Flashbulbs popped, not for the dress, but the story. I didn't pose, just smiled, soft, measured, whole. She tried to erase me, but all she did was underline me. A voice called out as I reached the sidewalk. A girl, no older than 16, stood holding a notepad. Ms. Langley, what would you tell your younger self? I paused, then said, Don't shrink to fit. They'll never build a box big enough for you anyway. Because healing isn't about forgetting. It's about finally choosing the right story to believe in.